Okay, good morning, good afternoon. Welcome to the webinar presented by Stephen Threadgold. My name is Philip Duffield and we're very happy to have you all today on the webinar. So we're going to go ahead and share the agenda for today's presentation. Today we'll focus on the importance of data and reporting in higher education. It's Learning understand that both students and teachers want access to easy to understand data and information that supports their learning. So on the screen you should all be able to see the agenda and our presentation. Go ahead and click the GoToWebinar app in your taskbar if you can't see it yet. Stephen will firstly introduce the topic of data, why does it matter, and he'll summarize the importance of data in today's higher education organization. He will then present the practical use of data-informed teaching and learning by use of core itslearning features. And we will allocate time at the conclusion of the webinar to address any questions that get typed in. Some of you have sent some questions in advance of the webinar, so we'll make sure to cover those as well. And finally, we'll conclude with information that you may find useful in understanding more about how itslearning can add value to your organization, whether you're an existing client or investigating the itslearning solution today. And we'll also share information about our next webinar to be hosted in April. So without further ado, I will hand it over to Stephen to begin today's presentation. Thank you, Stephen.
Thank you, Philip. So my name is Stephen Threadgold. I'm Head of Product Management here at itslearning. And as well as being Head of Product Management, I'm also the Product Owner for the reporting part of our offering. Reporting is a fundamental part of itslearning. We have a dedicated team of BI experts and developers, testers, and also graphic designers. And those guys and myself, we are responsible for delivering all of the reporting solutions you see within itslearning. I spend a lot of my time talking to different organizations, working with local teams, working with customers, being involved in a lot of the sort of strategic direction for itslearning. And that's one of the reasons I also look after reporting, because that's a fundamental part of where itslearning is going. We're making sure that all of this great data that we have is able to be bubbled up and put straight into the hands of educators. And that's really what we're going to focus on today. I'm going to start just by setting the scene a little bit, just by talking about why data is important, but also share some of the research and some of the information that's out there on what educators really want to get from the data. Because it's this sort of need, this sort of needs-driven approach that really powers what we do and what we want to offer whenever we're working with data and showing data within itslearning. So I'm going to reference back to a very important piece of work that was done back in 2013, and I think it acts as a really good touchstone for us to be able to sort of see what educators expected back in 2013, and then we'll bring it right up to date and look at what educators want now, and then I'll show some of the ways we're trying to deliver that and some of the great benefits we have for educators of using the built-in reports that are within itslearning. So back in 2013, educators were saying, look, we really want to have data. We know it's something that's important to us, and we know it'll help us and help drive success for our students. But they were looking for ways to do that. It wasn't as clear then. Data wasn't as readily available. But now, when we look at what educators want from data, they're saying that they rely on it. They're relying on data to understand where their students are, and then also to personalize the learning experience for each student. They're saying now that they really value the data, but one of the problems they have is there's just not enough time in amongst preparing lectures, working with students, doing research, all of the things, make up the day-to-day life in higher education. It's very difficult to find time to spend a lot of time poring over data. And that's one of the important things that we've taken away from the research, is that we need to find ways to present the data in an easy to understand way that will help you make a real change. And of course, what do the educators want to do? What do you guys really want this data to do? Well, back in 2013, it was really about, things like assessing and analyzing and pivoting, and that's not changed. So the whole concept of being able to look at data, understand it, and then make changes is really important. And they were asking back then, tools to simplify this, and then also the first sort of embryonic concepts of maybe students should see some of this data and understand their progress and where they're coming from. Now things are, a little bit more mature. It's about trends, it's about making strategic decision, it's about making sure that students are progressing in the right way towards mastery, and by that we mean sort of standards mastery, so being able to show that I understand the learning objectives associated with my course or with my module. So I'm always moving forward, and then how can we show that? So at the heart of what we're trying to do is a really simple virtuous triangle almost of I want to be able to see the data, I want to be able to analyze it, understand it, and then I want to be able to pivot instruction. I want to make changes as an educator so my students benefit. Then I can check that the benefits made, a good impact. Then I might analyze the data, then I might pivot again. So it's a constant cycle, it's a virtuous cycle going round and round. And this is what we've tried to do with our reporting. So now I'm going to jump in and talk about how we can help and what we can do. There's a lot of information in these slides. As Philip said, you'll be able to look at this presentation again. We will share that. We're also open for questions. You'll see at the side in the GoToMeeting control panel, there's a little item marked questions. Just type them in there and Philip will sort of pull them together. We've already had a few that we'll try and answer at the end, but this is really about us showing you what we're doing, but we're also happy to take questions about both what we're working on now, what we offer today, and also I'm going to show you a little bit about what we're going to offer over the next sort of 9 months or so. So for us, data is part of the cycle of learning. It's a real important part. Yes, we can plan, we can engage, we can teach, assessment, reflection, which is really important in higher education. But underpinning all of that is reporting. So it's a fundamental part of what we try and deliver at itslearning. And for us, it comes in many different ways, reporting. And we don't have time to talk through all of these options. I just wanted to give you a quick summary. Today, we're going to concentrate on the in-course reports, the items that we give directly to educators, the information we give them so they can understand how their students are progressing and they can make good decisions to, to drive forward improvements in education. But we also offer things like advanced reporting, which is really aimed at the whole, the whole sort of faculty or university or college level, that allows you to compare, different colleges and the way they're working and look at sort of a more holistic view. And we call that advanced reporting. That's something else that we offer. And then we also offer something called a data warehouse, where you can actually grab the data that powers the reports and do your own analysis on it. And that's very popular in higher education institutions. Thinking about the Norwegian Business School, for instance, they use that data to look at student retention and how to really make sure that they're helping those students that need it. And they run some very interesting algorithms that they've been generated themselves, that they've been working with partners on, and they use the data that we have in our library, in our warehouse, to do that. So today we're going to look at the in-course reporting, but we've also got these other features that sort of drive the overall holistic view of how we handle data. And although it sort of starts and it looks like it's not the most important, it is, because you can see this graph is pivoted in two directions. One is the sort of deep insight, the depth of the data, but also the immediacy of it. So everything we see in the 360 reports is completely up to date. It's showing your students as they are from minute to minute, from hour to hour. And that's really important, to be able to deliver that to educators so they can decide what to do in the course. So let's talk a little bit about the 360s, what they offer and how you can use them. So what are they? The first thing to say is they're available to everybody. It's not a module that you have to, sign up to or anything like that. It's there and it's available to everybody. They are behind what we call a customer setting. So some institutions, especially those, institutions that are concerned about data privacy and so on, they have them turned off. They're not available, but as standard. It's something that just comes as part of the license fee. We don't charge anything extra, even though there's a lot of sort of deep data, and some organizations and some of our competitors may charge for these sort of things. We think this is something that just be part of your your day-to-day use of itslearning. So they're available to everybody. They're available in each course, which means that each course educator, it doesn't matter if it's the course is managed by 4 tutors and a lecturer. Everybody who is an instructor within the course gets access to the 360s, and they come in 2 sort of formats. They have an overview which shows the entire course, and this can be filtered by groups and so on, so you can choose to hone in on particular groups of students. And then we have a sort of a deep dive view, as we call it, where you can jump in and see what's going on in detail for each of the individual students. So some of the questions that people want to ask, and we think this is really important, is, so I'm delivering my materials online. I'm delivering them in a blended mode where I have a mixture of lectures. I have some items online. I might record some videos and put them into itslearning for the students to watch. I want to know, as an educator, are my students engaged with the course online? And not just about simple stats like logins and amount of time they've spent. Are they engaged in the communications? Are they engaged in the social interactions within my course? If I put up a discussion group, it would be great to know if some students are sort of avoiding that, if they're not playing their part in that I'd like them to play, because I want this to be a holistic view. I want them to be engaged. So those are the sort of questions that we're trying to answer here. So when we talk about activity, it's not just simple logins. It's really about, is that engagement going up or down over time? Are they involved in social interactions as well as, looking at items within the course, etc. And, simple things like, are they actually, logging in? And also, do my students only start logging in, for instance, when I have exams coming up? And if so, I might want to try and do something about that. So this is the sort of information we give in the activity report. And these are the questions that we're answering. So I can view this across my course. I can sort it by groups. I can decide to have the most active and the least active at the top, and then I can jump in and I can look at any of the individual students. And the sort of information we're showing here is how often the students visit the course, an activity heat map going back from when the course started. So as you can see, these are really designed for year-long courses, but they work equally as well with semester-based courses or term-based courses. That's absolutely fine. And I can see, for this student, are they spending, time in the course, equally throughout the semester, or are they only, upping their attendance towards the end, upping their sort of activity towards the end? And as we said, it can also say about things like communication. Are they starting threads? Are they replying to bulletins? Are they commenting on bulletins? Are they putting in discussion posts? How are my students interacting with the materials that I put into the course? And you'll see later on that one of the things that we're adding ready for the new academic year is the ability that when I've seen, for instance, a student may be off track or a student is not engaging as I'd like them to, I can click on a button and send them a quick message to say, you should really be thinking about this, or, why don't you, look at the last discussion and add something. So it's all about being able to take those proactive steps. So that's the 360 part that looks at activity. We also look at progress. We look at how students are moving through the materials that I've set. This is slightly different to grades. Grades has its own report, as you can see. This is really about how my students are looking at the materials that I put out. Are they visiting the resources that I've included? Are they completing the activities that I've set? When I look across my course, I might have some students who are very engaged, some students who are not so engaged, and it'd be great to try and understand, how, their engagement patterns and things like that. So really, how many of the course assessments have students completed? How many have they looked at? How many of the things that I've asked them to look at have they reviewed? I can also look at things, which of my resources are being, are popular. We have another report that allows you to look at that. And then also for individual students, what we call submission profiles. Are they handing in work on time? Is work tending to be handed in late? So that's all shown through this, especially when you're using the assessment systems built into itslearning. So those are the sort of questions that we can look at here. And then we can do a deep dive in for an individual student, and I can see their submission profile. I can see whether they are completing items on time, whether they're completed past the deadline, or whether they've been incomplete. I can also look at the resources, which ones they visited, not visited. And then I can even see things like results from SCORM objects, if those are in place. And I can filter, for instance, to see if I've put a lot of links in, has the student looked at them? Are these mandatory? The things that I've said are mandatory, has the student looked at them? I also get a good idea about the amount of time that they're spending online. This is not a completely accurate measurement of time online. It's an indicator of how long people are spending. That's because when we are working on the web, we're not installing anything on the student's computer that, like or running like a SCORM object that would give very, very detailed. What we're doing is we're asking the browser, is the student looking at this? The browser may say yes, but of course sometimes people leave computers on and stare out of the window or go for a coffee or a number of things. So time online is a really good indicator of how often and how much time students are generally spending within things, and we find that's a really good help to see which of the items that I've created are most looked at, which are most important, which are the ones that students are looking at the most. So again, this is trying to show a different view of how students are interacting with my course. The last of the 360 reports is really trying to show the direction of travel for the grades that the students are taking online within my course. So as you know, in itslearning, you can set tests that can be marked automatically. You can set assignments that can be answered using, Office Online or Google, and I can quickly and easily grade them using our all-in-one grader. It's very easy to set these assignments online. Students can work on them online. They don't even need to download, Office documents to their to their computer. They can do everything within itslearning, use all those great productivity tools from the cloud providers, and then I can easily assess those. So really, this report is showing across my entire course, what are the grade trends? Are they trending up? Are they trending down? Do I see, for instance, that one assignment was not as well completed by the students as I'd like? I see a lot of colleges where tutors and so on are working this out on their own in a spreadsheet, and that's absolutely fine. What we're trying to do is do this as automatically as possible and to show this data in a really easy graphical way. I'm sure a lot of people on this webinar are doing this day in, day out on spreadsheets and other systems at the moment to making similar sort of graphs. So we know how important this sort of information is. When I do a deep dive, I can see a much more detailed grade trend. I can see how many assignments were handed in on time or past the deadline and so on. And I can also choose to filter it. So I can, for instance, look at all of the tests that I set in that course, maybe over the entire semester. I can look at all of the written assignments. I can look at the tasks. And if I've set other types of assessment as well, I can see those. So what I can do now is I can see is the student doing well in tests? Is the student doing well in, for instance, the written assignments that I've set them? So again, I can look, for each individual student, I can compare the entire course, and then I can look down into each individual student. So what the 360s are really doing is providing a very holistic view at this top, and then allowing you to deep dive in, and then to pivot instruction, to contact those students, maybe set them additional work if you thought that was helpful, but also those students that are excelling, to give them work to stretch them even further. Because this is not just about remedial work. I think this should always be considered in the context of making sure those individual students are getting what they need out of the course, and maybe that means extra work. So those are the 360 reports. Those are as standard within itslearning. Before I move on and talk about what's coming and some of the other reports, I think it's really important just to say that as well as the 360 reports, we also have lots of other reports that have been in itslearning, almost some of these since its inception. And I can see things like learning objective mastery. How are my students progressing against the learning objectives of the course? Have all the students mastered them? Have any of the students not yet mastered them? Have any of them not really been able to reach the achievement that I want to set for them? We've got the gradebook, and that has trends and progress in as well. But I can also see at a glance when I'm using standards, are they aligned well to the materials in the course? Which of the materials I've added are aligned to the standards that we're trying to teach in the course? I can also look at things like personal activity and see dates of last login. We have things like progress report and the summary report, and a lot of that is being replaced by what's in the 360s, and we'll eventually retire those, and you'll see it all through the 360s. So these reports are really there to flesh out and make sure that anything that you want to see, be it grades, be it standards, progress, be it even simple information like, when my students are last logged on, I can. Eventually all of that will be in the 360s, and I can see it in one place and see it through one set of graphs and information. So we've talked a lot about what I can get from the 360s. We've talked a lot about the information that we have in the 360s. I think it's worth just reflecting on, what we see are the real core benefits. Making sure that individual course tutors and lecturers have a good understanding of student progress, not just academic progress, but how they're engaging with the course, how they're working with the course, and are they looking at the materials that I've set. Okay. So we can't tell you if the students have understood them, we can't tell you, if the students have gone through them in detail, but we can give you a good idea about, are they well engaged, are they engaged in the discussions and the submissions and so on, and are they actually going to the It's Learning and looking at the materials. And it doesn't matter if they're looking at them on their mobile phone or whether they're looking at them in It's Learning. We can sort of give you a good idea about where that is. It could give you a good insight into which students need which sort of attention. Are students excelling, doing really well in their grades, but not really looking at the course materials? I might want to talk to them about how they're working. They might be working in a different way, and I might want to support them like that. And also it's great to be able to engage students through these different sort of prisms. Look at the activity, look at the progress, look at the grades, and engage with them in like that. So this is really useful when we break down into tutor groups as well within universities and colleges, and we have sort of more one-to-one time with our students, and we can say, look, it's clear that there's some materials you've not been looking at yet. You should now go away and make sure that you've read those because they're important for the next lecture. So everything I've shown you is available in It's Learning today. It's available to all of our customers. Some, as I said, some institutions have chosen not to activate these because they're thinking, very carefully about, this sort of data and how it's used, but they can be turned on at any time. It's just a case of talking to your It's Learning representative, and they can make sure that happens. So where are we taking these? What are we doing next? And how are we going to really make good on our promises to make these more proactive and give you the information you need to pivot everything that you're doing within It's Learning? Well, there's a few things that we're working on now that are near completion, and by that I mean they're probably going to be released in our next main release, which will be in April. In fact, I'm absolutely sure that Student 360 View will be in the next release. We hoped it would go in the last one, but we had to just move it to the next. Just those of you that don't know It's Learning, we release normally about once or so a month, once every 5 weeks or so. Releases will sometimes contain a lot of features. We have good release notes. We have ways for you to see what's going on within It's Learning, especially for colleges that have got a lot of users. We can offer access to a site where you can see what's going on in It's Learning before it gets out there, and that's something you can talk to your It's Learning representative to see. Our release process is very centered around making sure that we are improving items each time, so we look for incremental updates. We try not to do big bang changes. We try and increment and we make changes based on feedback. So one of the things that we got when we first released the 360 is one of the important bits of feedback, especially from colleges and universities, is it would be great to show students the same reports that I'm seeing as a tutor. It's their data, they should be able to see it. So we have a new option. This has to be turned on for the institution because some institutions don't get to have 360s, which is fine. And then each individual course tutor, each individual lecturer can choose for their course whether this information is shared with their students. And they can turn it on and they can turn it off, and they can choose whether it's all of the 360s or whether it's just for instance, activity, or maybe just progress. Progress is a really important one because it shows the student of all the materials available, how much they've read and how much they've engaged with. So actually progress is one of the ones, we'd sort of love to see turned on the standard, but we've given this as a choice to the individual course tutor. Institutions can set the default. That's something that we allow, but it can still be turned off because we know course tutors want to have more ownership of their course and how they work with their students. So it can be set as the default, but it can be turned off. And what this does is it gives the student a view of their data only. They don't see any averages or anything like that. They just see their data. And it's a really simple system. I get the same list of the 3 types of reports, and I just click on them and it appears in the top menu. So that's a great little feature that's coming in the next release. Also planned for the next release is lifting the 360 so they can be seen by what we call mentors. In itslearning we have a role called supervisor or mentor. Sometimes that can be, for instance, a program manager in a higher education institution. It can be somebody responsible for pastoral care. It can be a course leader. And we call them mentors or supervisors, but really they're somebody that has oversight of a number of students. And then what I can do is I can see the 360 reports for all of the students that I'm supervising, and I can see all of the courses that they are currently engaged in. So it's all of the active courses. This is very much immediate data. It's the courses they're in now. And I get 2 views, my students, and these are all the students I have responsibility for, and I can compare them, and I can see the courses that they're part of, but then I can almost flick the view, move on to the course view for an individual student, and that will show me all the courses and the students that are within those courses. So I'm getting both a student-centric view, and for those students that I'm responsible for only, a course-centric view. So we think this is something that's really going to be of interest to those institutions that have a person responsible across courses for individuals. So for instance, if a student comes to see their year tutor and say, look, I'm having difficulty, the year tutor, if they're set up as a mentor for that student, can see all of their courses in one go and then do a deep dive into any of them and say, yes, it looks like for instance, earth science is a problem. It looks like you've not been attending, you've not been engaged. Let's talk about that. What can we do to help you? So this is really about giving a more holistic view of that great data. And again, it's optional. You don't need to use it. It's there if you want to use it. And again, we want to see this in the next release, so sometime around April. Ready for the academic year, ready for it'll probably be towards the early part of summer, so it'll be there by the time most institutions go back for their new academic year. Is a really nice feature of being able to say, I've looked at my 360s, I can see some students that I could really just do with talking to quickly. I can click on their names or straight from their individual report, click a button, and then it'll generate automatically a message. You can choose to include information from the report, and then you can put in the text that you want, and then that will get sent straight for the student. And of course, our messaging system can be used almost like as informal chat. So maybe we can say, look, there's a problem here, Edith and Carolina. We nearly, you're not engaged with the course you want, or your grades are going down, and I'd really like you to do something about that. Let's have a chat about it. What can we do? So it's being proactive. It's being able just to, send that message out. You can do that now with the reports. You can see the names. You can go up to the button at the top and type in the name, and it'll generate a message. But it's much better to be able to either grab people in groups or send this automatically, and that's what we're trying to do. Another thing that we have that we want to have ready for back to school is our first stages of making these reports a little bit more proactive. A lot of the feedback we've had is these reports are great. It'd be good to see a summary. And it'd be great to have that sent to me so I can view it on my my itslearning app on the way to my institution or on my way back, or whenever I want to. So very simple system. We're going to make this as easy to use and as simple as possible. Very simple option. Do I want to have a weekly update? And what that will do is it will summarize what's gone on, talk about, you know, how many students have viewed the materials, how, you know, is the overall time spent in the course up or down, the sort of key information, and it'll send you a weekly update, you know, with that information in, and then you can use that as a prompt to jump in and look at the 360 reports. So it's just giving you a little bit of a summary of what's going on. Turn it off at any point, one click to turn it off, then maybe, you know, a few weeks later turn it back on. We want to make it easy to use. It's going to be there as standard, but you can turn it off straight away. And of course it'll only be there if you're using the 360 reports. Nice little feature. We think it's really going to sort of help teachers and tutors understand what's going on and be able to, you know, it's going to be a little bit more proactive. Our big next piece of work, which we're not going to see until I think the autumn. I don't know exactly when, because we're just at the beginning stage of this. We're at the prototyping stage, and I'm going to show you guys some brand new pictures of what this is going to be and how it's going to work, which have come from the prototype. We're about to start working with key customers on to get good feedback. We want to make reporting a lot more proactive. Thinking about that you know, the research at the beginning that said teachers don't always have time to go looking at reports and understanding what's going on. It would be great if they could just choose what they wanted to be informed about, and then get, for instance, a weekly or another summary. So what we're trying to do is transform this report from a passive resource to an active resource. We want to save tutors and educators and teachers time. We want them to choose what they want to be informed about. We want to notify them when, for instance, students are struggling or maybe excelling, and they can then take action. And we want this to be easy to use and available to everybody. So what this system will do is it'll allow me as a tutor to pick what are the measures that are most important. And this itself is a really useful tool. So I can choose, for instance, if I want to view a scatter graph that shows average time in the course by the overall average score. Okay, and I'd obviously need to pick, you know, which of my scores I want that to average out. And it could be, you know, if I use my same A to F for everybody, then that's great. It can be everybody. But we also know that some courses have some things in percentage, some things in points, some things in A to F. So I'll choose which one of those I want to have averaged out. And then it'll show me where my course lives, where my sort of students are on that. And each of these dots represents a student. And then I can choose to create what we call a notification group. And I can choose, for instance, to choose those students which are not spending much time in the course and are not doing well on their grades. But there's lots of other items as well. So for instance, I can pick from, you know, number of the mandatory items that I put in the course that they viewed. I can pick from number of assignments created, number of assignments completed, and so on. So I can pick things that are important to me from the drop-down lists. I can then create an area that I want to be notified on, and it doesn't have to be those students that are struggling. It can be those students that are excelling. I can change the area. It's not just broken into quadrants. I can expand it or grow it depending on what my average scores are or the amount of time I'd like them to see. And then when I've set that up, I can see it there. I can give it a name. It'll tell me instantly how many people are in it, and then I can get a weekly or bi-weekly or monthly update about who's entered that area, who perhaps has left that area. So I can then jump straight in and maybe give those students some help. I can come straight back here and I can change at any point. I can turn these on and off. I can message that group. I can delete it. And if I show you another screen, I can also have one group for my high flyers and one group that may need support. And because there's only a few high flyers and I've spoken to them, I can turn that off and not get those messages sent to me, but I'll still get the support group messages. And I can choose multiple criteria for what to be notified about, and I can see them all on one page, and it's immediate and it's from my group. Okay. So these are my students, so I choose what I want to get notified on, and then we will send those notifications out, and I'll see them drop into my message queue. I can look at that on my mobile, I can look at that on my desktop, and I can then jump in and see if I want to take further actions to help those students. This is something which is in the process of being designed at the moment. Those existing customers, if you're interested in being part of our prototyping sessions, they only last about half an hour or so. We go through the sort of working prototype that we have. We ask questions and say, what do you think? Give us feedback. We've already got a lot of customers identified, but if there's people on this course, people on this webinar that want to be involved in that, then just talk to your local representative and they can drop me a note and we can get that sorted, because we're going out over the next few weeks to get lots of feedback on this. So we hope to have it around autumn. It will revolutionize, we think, the way people think about 360 reports and that immediacy of data. And we think it's really going to help and lift what we're doing. So long-term roadmap, a few of the other things, and I have to say that these are trends, these are things that people are giving us feedback, because basically our roadmap is based on research, but mainly based on what our customers tell us, what our future customers tell us, and what feedback we get from educators working in itslearning. We've been told, a number of times it'd be great to be able to export some of the data from 360s. That's one of the things that we want to start doing it in terms of our longer term roadmap. So after the summer and into next spring as well. Having a flicked view of the 360, so as well as being able to see what items my students have looked at, being able to look at what materials students have looked at. We already have a report that does this. We already have a report that shows this, but working with colleagues, we had some great feedback again from BI, who've done a lot with data, and they were saying it'd be really good to be able to see the trends that are going on within this view. So is it the same students looking at the same activities week after week? Is there a group that aren't looking at it? So showing some sort of trends. That's something we want to start exploring. And also we want to maybe start to differentiate desktop versus app. At the moment we combine those to make it simple. We want everything to be as simple as possible, but we have had a number of requests saying, look, on the 360s, can I see how many students are using app and how many students are using desktop, because that might make me change the way I deliver my course and how I think about my course. And that's something we want to look at. At the moment we just show all usage, and maybe we can find ways to show that in a good way. Okay, I'm conscious of time. I think we should move on to questions. I just wanted to point out as we move into that as well as the sort of 360 reports as standard within our product today, college administrators, university administrators, they can also see the sort of holistic views, how many people are logging in, when they're logging in, what time are they logging in, how much time are they spending in courses, who's spending the most time in courses, etc., when are they visiting courses. That's there as standard as well. Not part of the 360s, but I just wanted to mention that because I think it's important.
Wonderful, Stephen. Thank you. Great presentation. Thanks for all the information about how data can be used in itslearning. We have had a question before the webinar about how the 360-degree reporting functionality complies with European data protection regulations, GDPR. Could you fill us in there a little bit?
There was a, here we go, because this came in, it was a very good, it's probably the question we get asked most, I think, and it's important to say that itslearning is completely compliant with GDPR. For those of you that have not sort of come across GDPR, it's the Europe-wide data protection regulation. It came in 25th of May last year. Everything that we store is following best practices for GDPR. We are only storing that data so it can be used by educators. There's no other use for it. It is not normally shared by third parties unless the institution wants to share it with a third party through, for instance, the data warehouse. And then that's always up to the institution. We actually can't turn on the warehouse. The institution does it. We activate it, and they then create an account for a third party and give that third party an account and can deactivate it at any time. So we always follow best practice GDPR. It's worth saying that the course, the mentor, and the student 360 reports, can be turned off at an institutional level. So if a college is not ready for those, and we have some colleges that aren't yet ready for those, and I totally understand that, and it can be turned off, and that data is not seen in the course, it's not seen by mentors, it's not seen by students. Even if the student view is turned on, it's then up to the individual course tutors to choose whether their students can see it or not. And then finally is like an extra protection, and this is something that we did as part of our GDPR work as we were preparing for GDPR. This was about 2 years ago for us because it was really important to be complete compliant on the 25th of May, is you can also opt out completely of recording the student time on task. So the amount of time students are spending within assignments and tests and materials within its learning and within its learning only, an institution can tell us we don't want that recorded at all, and then we just stop recording. It is not recorded. We have no, we have no recording of it at all. We don't record it in any way. Downside of that is if you have opted out and then you ask for it to be turned on 2 years later, for instance, you won't have the data for the last 2 years. You can't then do comparisons. It only then starts recording from that point. So we're really confident that we're storing the data in the correct way. The right to be forgotten, if a student invokes the right to be forgotten, they will disappear from the 360 reports if the institution instructs us that the student has demanded the right to be forgotten, and we have processes for that. So all of the 360 reports we think are GDPR compliant.
Okay, wonderful, Stephen. Thank you for that thorough response. There was also a lot of excitement about the Notify Me functionality that's upcoming in some future releases. There was a question about whether that would be an option for both mentors and teachers, or whether you're currently looking at the for teachers, because you mentioned it was for their groups.
It's mainly going to be inside courses, but yeah, when we've already had requests, can this be, at a sort of a higher level, can this, if it's not mentors, can somebody else do this? That's something that we're going to look at. I think the challenge is that if we want to do it across courses, it gets very complex very quickly. We're trying to keep this as simple as possible. So I think the honest answer is yes, we would like to see that, but we want to make sure we get it out to course tutors, get it working, get it as simple as possible first, before we introduce it to mentors. However, some of the things like being able to email a student straight from the report is in mentors. So that is going to be there as sort of, a standard, because the 360s are the same no matter where you view them. So yes, I'd like to see it for mentors, but I don't think that's in the same time frame as for course teachers. And we'll just need to be very careful, because I think really what people are asking for is, can I set cross-course items as well? Because you wouldn't want to be notified for each course. You probably want to know across the course. And there we have lots of challenges with courses using different grades and grading systems, some using online assignments, some not. So it's something we need to look at. But I'd love to see that eventually. But I don't think it'll be within the same time frame as the course version.
Okay, wonderful, Stephen. Well, thank you so much for a thorough overview of the functionality and the way that it can be used to support teaching and learning today. We appreciate your time. I do want to highlight some additional resources that itslearning makes available for organizations to help improve teaching and learning. Here's a list of some links that we believe you would find interesting in proceeding from here. Specifically, the Advanced Reporting ebook is a good follow-up for organizations to look at the data warehouse and some of the functionality that Stephen mentioned. And also the best way to follow itslearning is on LinkedIn and Twitter. We are going to produce this video on YouTube, and we'll make some clickable links for you all to be able to get these if you're not able to capture them now. But please do follow us on our links there. It's a great way to keep in touch with what's going on within the higher education team at itslearning. And finally, I do want to introduce the next webinar, which will pay specific attention to student-centered learning. We understand that this is a top priority within higher education organizations, and we see that pedagogy comes first, and then you start to look at tools that can support those pedagogical processes, and with that focus on student outcomes. So thank you again to everyone. Thank you again to Stephen for the presentation, and thank you to everyone for signing in today. We very much appreciate you spending your time with us, and we'd like to wish you all a great afternoon or a great morning. Thanks again. Thank you, Stephen.
Thank you.